Hi, I know you're looking forward to doing your First Communion pretty soon. Well, let me tell you something before you engage in the First Communion about what popes do. You know, popes, in general, all popes have very important responsibilities. They have to make very important decisions for the good of the people of God. But one of the things they really love doing is they love giving First Communion to children, right? Because that makes them feel like they're like parish priests, and they started off as parish priests, and that's the case with Pope Francis. Do you know that last year, in May of last year of 2019, the Pope went to Bulgaria, and there he gave First Communion to a group of 245 children that were beautifully prepared. This is what he said. I'll read it to you. He said, "I am sure you will never forget this day, your first encounter with Jesus in the sacrament of the Eucharist." He told them that they were all very beautifully dressed, all these children. And then he said, First Communion is above all celebration. We celebrate Jesus, who wants to remain always by your side. He will always be with us. Now I know you want Jesus to be at your side, and that you want to prepare this very, very important moment in your life. And of course, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, knows that you want to receive him in communion as well. But because of the pandemic, because of the virus, we're not able to go into churches, we're not able to do that. And I know that you really want to do this, right? So this is what the Pope says to you specifically this year, right? He says, boys and girls, I invite you to live this time of waiting as an opportunity to prepare yourselves better, praying, reading your catechism, and to deepen your knowledge of Jesus, and growing in goodness and in service to others. Now, we can ask ourselves, how did the saints prepare themselves for this very special moment in their life? I'll start with one saint, Saint Pope John Paul II. Pope John Paul II. You all know him. Well, he did his First Communion in Wadowice in Poland in 1929. He was barely 8 years old. Now look at this beautiful picture of his First Communion, the day he did his First Communion. See, he looks quite serious, and there he is with a candle in his hand, and he looks a little bit like a soldier on guard, right? And he seems to invite people to protect Jesus. It's kind of like he's intuited the dangers that he might face. He's young, but he's really quite ready. And he stands on guard to defend Jesus. And he wants to defend Jesus from all the dangers against the church and to protect his own soul in grace. So that day was really one of the happiest days in 1929. So that was Pope John Paul II. But we also know the story of the First Communion of Sainte Thérèse de Lisieux. She tells all about it in her Story of a Soul, a book that she was asked to write, and it became literally an international phenomena. And I invite you to read it if you haven't had a chance. But there, she recounts her First Communion, and also she talks about how her sister Léonie, her older sister, also did First Communion as well. And she loved Léonie a lot, and they were very, very good friends. And on the day of Léonie's First Communion, her father brought her some beautiful ice cream cake and stuff, and she was really happy. And she was very grateful to her parents for having taught her all about the truth of Jesus in the Eucharist. And this is what she writes, right? This is actually what her mother writes in her diary. Her mother says, Céline said the other day, how can God be in such a tiny host? How can God be in such a tiny host? Thérèse answered, that is not strange, because God is almighty. And what does almighty mean? It means he can do whatever he likes. And so for her, finally the great day arrived on May 8th, 1884. Now, Pope Benedict, he said that the very meaning of adoration, right, is that it's really a kiss. Adoration is like a kiss of Jesus in Holy Communion. That's what adoration is really. So let us go to the chapel where Jesus is held. We can go, it's this way, all right? And that's where you will be fused with him. Now, also, I have to tell you that Saint Josemaria also, he made his first communion in 1912, right? And it was the feast of Saint George, right? I don't know if you know Saint George, but he's a good saint. And he also said that Jesus came to take possession of his soul, right? So now in those days, it was the first time that young kids could receive communion because of who? Because of Pius X, who changed the thing so that younger kids could receive communion. You didn't have to wait until you were 15 or 16 or 17, right? And so that's thanks to Pius X, right? So Saint Josemaria was always thankful to Pius X because he was able to receive communion when he was young, right? And so for him too, it was a big day. But you know what happened? He went to the hairdresser. His mom brought him to the hairdresser. And the barber, he was like in a rush or something, and he took a curling iron and he burned him. He burned him, right? But he didn't say anything to his mom. He didn't want to upset his mom, right? But the mom saw the burn marks after, right? But he offered that to Jesus, right? Isn't that good? He offered it to Jesus. So he also had his first communion, and he was very happy about that. And he really felt that Jesus came into his soul. And the reason we are interested in Saint Josemaria is because he learned the spiritual communion. Let's go and see the oratory. Now, as I move up here into Earnscliffe, I'll tell you a little bit about how Josemaria learned the spiritual communion. You see, he learned it from an elderly priest whose name was Father Manuel Laborda. He did his first confession with him, and Father Laborda gave him a penance to do. The penance was to eat a fried egg. And then he taught him the spiritual communion. And this is perhaps what you can memorize, all right? It goes like this. Spiritual communion. I wish, my Lord, to receive you with the purity, humility, and devotion with which your most holy mother received you, with the spirit and fervor of the saints. That's the spiritual communion. I wish, my Lord, to receive you with the purity, humility, and devotion with which your most holy mother received you, with the spirit and fervor of the saints. He remembered that all his life, and any time he couldn't receive communion, he would just say that. I invite you to do it as well.